All right, we'll go ahead and get started. So thank you all so much for coming out tonight. We appreciate your time and hopefully you learned a little bit. We've got a good number of folks who are online as well. So if you know of anyone who, oh, thank you. Yeah, we're gonna turn off this light. That way you can see it much better. If you know of anyone who couldn't make tonight, we'll have this video up on our website, on my YouTube channel as well. So folks can look at it that way. For the people online, they can chat in questions as we go. If you have questions here, feel free to raise your hand. You've got the PowerPoint slides in front of you. We're going to cover a good number of things in a quick amount of time. That way we can leave time for questions at the end. And then we've got a couple folks here who can talk to you afterwards more in depth about one of your personal questions for your properties if you'd like. So I'll go ahead and get started. So who are we? Well, that's me, as you know. We also have Scott Yamamoto up front, our real estate manager, and Heather Hall, our CAUV staff member. Probably all of you, if you've been on CAUV, have worked with Heather at some point. So she's going to be leading the discussion, talking about some of the different topics. Bless you. And these are all things that have been asked of us. More so, we've held a CAUV session every year. So these are some of the questions or topics that we're going to kind of dive into a little bit more in depth, things like the checks, for example, things like recoupment and other topics as well. On Wednesday, we're going to be partnering with the Ohio Farm Bureau and a couple other organizations to do an online Woodlands Wednesday conversation. That's purely virtual, more in depth on the wood and the forestry CAUV and Ohio Forest Tax Law. So if you're interested in that, we've got information on our website too, or we can send you the link as well. That's going to be more of an in-depth on that piece of it. So Heather, if you want to come on up and then we'll get started. Feel free, like I said, raise your hand, ask questions or chat in questions, and we'll go from there.
All right, so these are kind of the topics that we're going to talk about. Now, has anybody never been on the program or new to CAUV? Okay, so hopefully we'll be able to answer any questions. So we're going to go over the renewals or inspections, forestry, recoupment, what it means to you, and we'll go over some questions. So people that are on CAUV should have already received their CAUV renewal. I know I get a lot of phone calls about, questions, how do I fill out my renewal? So we tried to send an example to hopefully help you guys fill out your yearly renewal. So these come out the beginning of every year after you've been on the program. You'll get these out. So really you need your phone number, your email. These are your parcels. And a lot of times I have people call and say, you missed my parcels. I don't have parcels on there that should be. Well, I say, just look over onto the other side because they missed that they'll be on this column and sometimes on the other column too if you have more than 4 parcels. If you have less than 4 or 10 acres that you're commercially farming, then we do require you to fill out your income portion, which is number 4 right there. Number 5, it asks if general farming operations are changing this year, yes or no. So you'll want to circle that. If it's yes, then you can either attach an explanation or write on the form. Down at this bottom, now a lot of other counties do have them, you guys fill it out, but for this portion, because we do our yearly inspections every summer, we only want you to fill it out if you have a conservation program or practice. You will fill out that portion and attach your map if you have any of that. And then just sign and date at the bottom. We are trying to go via email. Hopefully we can start doing our CAUV renewals on email. So we do like to have a nice legible email on there as well.
So any questions on the renewal form? Okay, we get a lot of questions sometimes for folks too that have said, I have not changed anything. Can I just say no change, sign?
Yep, and send on in.
Yep. We supported a piece of legislation to not make us go through this whole big administrative hurdle. Maybe this year it'll be pushed. How many of these do we have typically every year?
We sent out a little under 2,500.
So a good number of folks on CAUV for sure in our county. Slide.
Yep. So I was kind of excited about this. So last year we looked at over 4,500 parcels on CAUV. In 2020, we started scanning all of our files. So what we used to do is what would take months now takes only like 2 weeks. So we took every box, and, every summer we'd go out, we'd have a huge map. We'd have your file, we'd have your map, and we'd drive and we try to find your property and check it. So each box was a township. since we've scanned in everything, our GIS people worked really hard. And now you see what it looks like. Now, all these green parcels on here are all qualified CAUV parcels. So, we don't have a lot of time to inspect them. So we only have, somewhat seconds. So it definitely, though, has helped us get our inspections done quickly and better. We, base it off of, sometimes we'll go out in different crops, which we'll get into shortly. If a property is untouched or it looks fallow, or maybe you just didn't get to it yet, we're going to come out, we're going to recheck it. So we can highlight it a different color and we'll come back out. We usually try to come out maybe the end of the summer, sometimes in the fall. Maybe you're going to do winter week. So we want to try to give you guys enough chances to make sure that you're qualifying. If we have any questions or concerns, we'll give you a phone call or certified letter. Sometimes a certified letter is the best way to reach you. But just make sure that on that renewal, if there's any changes, note that, especially if you're going from like 20 acres of soybeans to a pasture, or you're going to start planting trees. Like, that's a big change that we need to be aware of.
And as you can see, with 45,000 parcels and properties on CAUV, we get a lot of questions asking, hey, can you schedule a time with me before you come inspect? And I'll be there just because of the sheer size of our parcel count. First, we just do a visual inspection, and then if we have follow-up questions, we'll schedule a time. We've walked many properties together, Nate as well, if that needs to be the case. But yes, Nate.
Go on, finish.
Okay, I thought you were raising your hand.
I am.
Oh, and something neat to see here too. You can definitely see Colebrook and Wayne townships are our highest levels of CAUV, and we'll get into kind of some of the impact of that and what that means for non-CAUV properties in those two townships, just as an example, so that you can kind of understand. But we have CAUV even in Ashtabula City. So literally, this program touches every single portion of the county.
What is that, everything including miscanthus grass or no?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
As long as they're on the CAUV program and they're still qualifying. That's because there are some properties that have miscanthus that did not sign up for the program.
State your question.
Could you explain the idle, what you can and can't, or how many idles you get, and how on some weather years David has made a call on how we do this?
Yeah, so you're able one idle year for any reason. You don't want to farm that year, that's fine. Second idle year, you'd have to go to the board of revision. You might have to go in front of the board depending. We also do look at the weather. There's been years where it's been swampy and nobody can get to the fields. We look, did you have a good history? Have you been religiously farming? We'd give you a pass for that year.
Without having to take the idle.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it was 2019, maybe. It was
That
really,
sounds about right.
really wet. Just almost no one. There's a big number of articles in the paper, and that's an act of God. We have a question here. Do you qualify for CAUV if you rent your land to have someone else plant it, or do you need to be the one to actually plant it yourself?
No, we have. I don't know for sure the statistics, but I think a lot more farmers are actually farming the land for the property owner. They're just kind of at their but like they got to make sure that farmer does plant. But yes, we don't look at rent as an income either. It's just whatever that farmer is getting off of your land.
So just like with our traditional real estate, if it's there, we don't necessarily care who's doing it as long as there's activity.
And the property owner has to apply for CAUV.
Yes, they have to apply for it.
Yep.
So this is kind of a little bit more on our mobile. Like I said, it takes Nathan and I usually go out every summer, and it's taken us probably 2 weeks, I think, was our quickest.
That's a lot. Usually about 8 to 9 full days.
So here you can see this is kind of a zoomed in view of what we're looking at. So on my tablet, I'll click on, I have to write what kind of crop they have. If they qualify or deny, if we have any kind of inspection comments, we need to type in a little bit more. And over on this side, you can see the dashboard where over by David, it'll say the different categories where we have qualify, a recheck, deny. So it's really nice to try to keep track and try to be a little bit more efficient when we're out in the field.
And this is us spend more time on properties that may have more questions, or if we need to follow back up, for example. And it also helps too, like I said, with 45 100 parcels, we can easily make mistakes as well. So
Mhm.
this lets us have kind of a paper trail to show when we visited, what would look like. We can actually even take photos and store them in here if need be, in addition to. So it's very helpful on the back end. Not every county does these checks every year. Technically, you're supposed to. We feel it's really important to have eyes on every property that we can, just because of the large tax savings that is with the property.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to point out that even though it's automated and we're moving and it shows us where we are and Heather can fill it in, we have a brief moment to look, make a call and move on. And as he said, once in a while, we may question because what we saw that day just didn't work. Doesn't mean it isn't being farmed. The biggest shock is there's a lot of hay made. There's a lot of places it's not quality, but we don't judge the quality. We have to judge, are you making that? So
Heather,
sometimes you're going to get questioned. Don't just understand it's a quick glimpse. We have to keep moving.
Mhm.
So it's a call we make as we're moving, and we'll revisit it if you don't agree with us.
What's our time frame that we go out and inspect?
We typically go out, we try to hit June 1st for our main inspections. Now, as we'll get into, I think in maybe the next slide, we do visit a couple different areas differently, different types of crops. But typically June 1st is when we like to try to get out there. So like maple production. So we try to go out when they're actually tapping. It's not easy to see if they're doing maple syrup production. We do have a good handful of people in our county that are actually just qualifying purely on maple syrup production. So it does make it much easier when we're going out when it's actually running and we can easily see it from the road. Grapes, we started doing this, I think 2 years ago. Maybe more. We used to just check grape vineyards when we're out in our summer inspection. Well, we should probably see if they're pruning them to make sure that they are actually being productive. And we actually came across a couple this year that we're having to remove because they haven't been producing, nor have they been doing anything with it for the last couple years. And then, so our forestry, Nathan Paskey and Sam Hawley, who are in the back, those two actually do all of my forestry inspections. It depends on when they can get out. It could be anytime from the beginning of the year to the end of the year when they'll come out and do inspections. We always want to make sure that we have a forest management plan on hand. So if you want to qualify for forestry, you have to have a plan because it takes the guesswork out of when he's out in the field. We're not questioning, how you should be managing. We're seeing that you're actually managing it for whatever the forester says. So typically we'll go out, they'll inspect kind of where you're at in the time cycle, is when it might be every 5 years. We tried to take on the Ohio Forest Tax Law program with the 5-year increments.
And what are some examples of management in the forestry?
Grapevine control, crop tree release, any invasive species. I know that, and I'm still learning too, but Jonathan Mock at the NRCS, they have an EQIP program where there's funding to help you with those tasks. So I advise you guys, if you want to look into that, to, contact them.
And we've heard from a lot of residents that were concerned when we said that at one point they'll have to harvest or they'll have to timber. That doesn't mean that at one point you'll have to clear your entire forest. So you're following your forest management plan. And at some point in the 30 years of your plan, you're going to have some type of action taken on the property. So that's important just to be able to follow it. And it helps preserve and keep good health your forest. So it could be very minimal or it could be quite involved, just depending on the type of forest. Yeah, Nate.
This year, how many new ones did we look at in 2022?
I want to say it was over 30.
I did 20 or so myself. How many did you do any of it? So in the old days, it was grapevines, a little bit of crop tree release. Every plant that I looked at started out the first 5 years control your invasive. Buckthorn, honeysuckle, privet. If you're on a floodplain, Japanese knotweed, and it's to the point that in some woodlots, if you don't, you may not have a woods to manage. And I guess when your neighbor's sitting there with 100 acres of buckthorn, we're not asking you kill every one, but we do need to see an attempt at some progress. So it can be time consuming, but that's going to be the number one management thing that most will have to do. Because this, I'll call it the new generation of foresters. The way they've been trained and they're looking at these woodlands, they're calling for invasives. And even old Mark Popacek, a longtime retired service forester, who's actually written plans now where he starts out with, if you don't control the honeysuckle or the buckthorn, there will be nothing to manage in the future. So that's an intensive job right there. So, please understand what your forester says when they said control invasives.
But this is the fastest growing area of CAUV that we have here in the county, which is great in the sense that it's preserving and it's protecting our woodlands, which is a good thing to see.
And typically too, real quick, the plans are typically 10-year plans. And I will always make sure I keep up to date with you guys. So if you do have a plan that's about ready to expire, I'll send you a certified letter saying, hey, I typically give you about a little over a year to get me in a new plan. So we can continue to follow that.
And you have a list of foresters that will work in our county,
Mhm.
and you have a list of a couple companies that can do that work.
Yes,
Correct.
yes, I do have a list. So if you guys need help finding forester or somebody that does the timber stand improvement work, I have their contact information as well.
If you'd like, we can go out to your forest and model for you. We look really good in plaid. That was a fun day. So now when I welcome up Mandy Orahood, who's the organizational director for Northeast Ohio Farm Bureau. So that's Ashtabula, Lake, Geauga, and Trumbull. And she wanted just to share a little bit about kind of the purpose of the program, and a little bit of helpful information too.
Yeah, so thanks for having me. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Farm Bureau, or you are, and you're maybe like, why in the world is Farm Bureau here with the auditor when I'm not a part of the auditors? So Ohio Farm Bureau is actually responsible for the CAUV program being enacted in 1973. So our farmers came together and really wanted an option to bring their farmland taxes down and to preserve farmland. So we worked with our elected officials and the Department of Taxation to create the CAUV program. It worked really well, right? It worked really, really well for many years. 2008 to 2014, our formula, which is very, very complicated and way above my pay grade, so I can't even begin to explain it to y'all. That formula kind of went haywire. It was this perfect storm of interest rates and crop prices. And many of our farmers saw a 308% increase in those property taxes, which for you guys, it's scary, right? So Ohio Farm Bureau instantly went to work in 2014 to work with the Department of Taxation to really study that formula, study what was happening in our economy, study what was happening, and try to also predict what was happening, which, as you know, too, is the challenge in itself. But in 2017, we were successful and we were able to get the reform passed, which resulted in a 30% decrease on property taxes for most of our landowners. So really exciting win for us. So basically our role here at Farm Bureau is we're just working with our county auditor. You guys have one of the best county auditors that I have ever had the privilege of working with in terms of learning and educating, and Heather is great to ensure that you guys are, being able to take advantage of this program. So I just really want to, thank you guys for doing this. So this educational program every year is great, and it gives us an opportunity to hear from you guys, because that's how Farm Bureau works. We work based on what our members and our community are seeing and the issues that they're facing so that we can take action on that. We get a lot of questions. I was telling David beforehand at our annual meeting this year, we had a huge amount of discussion on recoupment. We've got some farmers that really, really want that recoupment to stay. And then we have other that want that recoupment to be taken away because it's their property and they want to do what they want with it. I just want to remind you, just overall, not taking, a stance on it, that the recoupment is there to encourage that our farmland stay farmland. The perfect example is telling him our president of the organization in Geauga County went to sell. They were looking at selling some prime farmland in an area that was starting to become very developed. Well, those developers learned what the recoupment was and was like, nope, not for me. So they decided to keep it in farmland. So that right there shows you kind of why recoupment is there. We are, as an organization, really for property rights, but I think when it comes down to it and hearing our members talk at annual meeting, Jason, our president, he was there this year, really the discussion led to what's more important, property rights or having farmland to farm
in future generations. And as our farmers from all over Ohio, they just decided that farmland preservation was the most important aspect of that. So that's kind of why it's there. Sometimes it's a little frustrating. I know I'm going through trying to decide, do I enroll, do I not enroll? But it is there to keep farmland here and going for future generations, because as you all know, it's not easy finding farmland. And once it's developed, it's not going back to farmland, not at least for many, many generations. So thank you all for having me. And if you have any questions, let me know.
Mandy will be around after. Come on up, back up. So we'll go through, so the basics, and we typically touch on this first, but we'll touch on it kind of midway through. So remember, the basics of CAUV are, the state has a formula based on different calculations of costs of inputs, cost of production, and they apply that formula to every single soil type that we have here in the state. So what soil type you have on your property that you're entering into CAUV is the value that the state formula places. Instead of us using our market value, farmland could be 2,000 an acre, it could be 3,000. Instead of us using what you can actually sell it for, we use the state CAUV formula for your soil type as the market value that we apply tax rates to. Oftentimes, that's about a 75% or so savings on that farm, which is a huge savings in your taxes. To essentially keep folks in that program, the state has instituted what's called recoupment, as Mandy said. So essentially, should you ever decide to leave the program, you would have to pay the back 3 years of your tax savings to leave the program. So there's essentially a kind of an incentive to stay in, to keep your farmland, and to not change your use. So there's things to consider if you're thinking about entering CAUV. It's a huge savings. It's a good program, but should you ever decide to leave or to sell, or you just decide not to farm anymore, you would have to pay your back 3 years of tax savings. And Heather can talk a little bit more about recoupment and the details with that.
Yeah. One thing too that I do notice when people are on CAUV, they look at their tax bill and they pull me up, I'm not on the program. It says CAUV recoupment 0. And I'm like, you want it to say 0 because that means you're on CAUV. So when we do remove somebody, sometimes it's an owner requesting, please remove me. There has been times where I've talked to a landowner, told them how much the recoupament's going to be, and they're like, I think I'm going to think about it a little bit, because there is such a big savings. Sometimes you're not farming. You don't fill out that annual renewal. A lot of times, that's just the simple paperwork that you didn't turn in that you need to turn in every year. We're not as sticklers as the you need it every year. We're removing you. We'll give you a chance. So anytime that a property is subject for removal or you want to be removed, I'm going to have to send out a certified letter that you have to sign stating that you're going to be removed from the program. And I give you an ample amount of time to get back to me, to either, here's your renewal, this is why I'm going to remove you. If you don't fill it out within this, I'll give you a month. Once we get the renewal back, we're okay. We're not going to remove you. If it does continue through the removal process, what happens is it'll get added onto your tax bill. So what'll happen is it'll get added at the end of the year. You'll see it next year. Now, a lot of people don't understand that the recoupment will follow the parcel, not the person. So even if you sell your property and somebody else buys it, they're getting the recoupment unless you each have to decide, it's because we have a DTE form 102. That any type of property is getting transferred, because some of this is confusing for people. They have to sign that for the property to be able to be transferred, that they understand it's on CAUV, could be subject for recoupment. Now, sometimes people don't understand that it could come off of the program, or they want it to come off. I said, well, you have to talk to the buyer. The buyer and seller have to figure it out, because we are not saying, well, you have to pay recoupment because it's your property. We have no control over that. We're just following the plan.
But it doesn't have to actually leave the program if you do sell the property.
Yes.
So if you sell the property to another farmer or someone who wants to keep that property in the program, it can continue very simple. You just fill out a new application, and it transfers over from the old owner to the new owner. No recoupment, no penalties. It just continues.
Yeah, because it'll take me about a month to send out new paperwork as a new applicant, and we'll get you, get it out of their name and into your name. No. Okay.
Any questions on recoupment? Pretty solid on that? Okay.
Because I was going to touch base. I forgot. So if you were removed from the program and you don't feel that you should have been removed from the program, you do have the right to file board of revision in the beginning of January up until March 31st. So you can appeal it to the board and state why you should be put back on the program. And then by that time, if they decided to reinstate you, then your recoupment would be either credited back to you or onto your next either next half tax bill.
Is there a $25 fee? Say if I sell it to him,
Mhm.
my son, because Trumbull County, we passed away, and it was in the family. We got a bill for 25 from Trumbull County for a new application.
So typically by law, we have to, any new application is a $25 fee. Now, what we do try to look at, if we can find it, is if somebody does pass away, I'm not going to charge you a $25 fee. I'm going to waive that, under the circumstances, a death or something like that. We're not going to charge the fee. But yeah, for the initial applications, it's 25, but the renewals do not have a fee. So the renewals are free. It's, you don't have to pay anything for that.
Yes.
Heather, can you explain the non-commercial and the commercial with them?
Yeah, so you'll see on the renewals and on the initial applications, there is a section where you can fill out commercial timber or non-commercial woodland. Commercial timber, we typically have the people fill it out if you actually have a management plan, you're managing your woods for commercial use, because we're going to look at the actual commercial timber. Now, non-commercial woodland would be if you are farming over 10 acres, you automatically get that woods as non-commercial woodland. We don't care what you do in your woods. So that's where you would fill that part out. And so that's how we look at that.
We have a question online. If you have a 10-acre plot of land and you cut a path to the back of the field, does that take away from the plantable area?
So if they're cutting through the woods to get back to there?
To the back of the field. So if you have a 10-acre field, right in the middle of it is a path to get back to the field. Does that take away from 10 acres?
We wouldn't ding them for a little path to get there. So no.
Okay. And that, remember, is there's two ways essentially to qualify for CAUV. One is if you have under 10 acres, you can have the $2,500 or more in average income per year. You have to have that for 3 years. The other way is to have over 10 acres and to use those 10 acres for a commercial agriculture product. Hay, corn, woodlands, animals, and then there's some other fun things too, like fisheries, for example, and things like that.
Yep.
What about bees?
We do have some people that do bees, but we can only give about 1 acre because they can, essentially fly anywhere. So we have to try to keep it an acre. Same with kind of chickens. We typically give you about 1 acre for chickens.
So how we would do that is that on that acre, we would look at what soil types, and you would actually get CAUV on that 1 acre. The rest of your property, let's say you have 10 other acres, would be taxed and valued traditionally. Yes, question.
So I keep bees also. Transition from Cuyahoga County to Ashtabula County last year. With the $2,500 per year rule, am I able to use the income I've generated in Cuyahoga County, being this is my first year in Ashtabula?
So you bringing essentially what you were farming into this new.
That and then some, yeah. We had chickens, bees, and I've got pigs now.
Now,
so.
the property that you just purchased, have you been farming it for over 3 years, or the person before you farming it over?
I don't think she did. I think her husband did back. He passed in 2018, and I think she kind of just let it go. So I know she had a homestead tax,
Okay.
but I'm not sure about the seed.
Okay, yeah, because if it was land that you just purchased that hasn't been commercially farmed for 3 years, then you would have to start that process new there. You'd have to be commercially farming it for 3 years, and then on year 4 you can apply for CAUV.
Okay.
So we follow the land with all of our recoupment wise and tax saving wise.
Okay.
But it's good that you're able to bring those in. And now you can get started right now by talking with Heather. You can get that kind of process going, and then we'll be able to get you in the program. Any other questions? We kind of did a quick overview, a lot of details and information. But there's plenty of time to talk to any of us, our staff, more specific questions if you have them. Yes, Nate.
I just point out that the way that formula works when it comes to commercial timber is they took the soil value for farming and they gave it a drainage credit and a clearing credit. Initially, they didn't account for what it really cost to clear and drain. So in the end, at this point, every soil in our county during commercial timber is an administrative value. Last year it was $230. So the point of that is your market value goes up and you only have $230 an acre property if you're doing commercial timber. This gap is getting bigger, i.e. the recoupment potential is bigger. So I try to tell people that are getting into forestry, please understand when you get in it, you're in it for a long time because your recoupment will be a lot larger because the value of that soil is really low. And I think our woodland soils will always end up that way, even as rates raise, because of the money it takes to clear and drain it compared to its productivity. It'll always be an administrative value. Now, I'm sure that'll rise in time, but that's going to be the biggest difference. So be prepared if you're doing it for strictly commercial timber. It's a great reward, but it is a big risk. So just understand that before you decide to do it.
And one last thing, and then we'll break. And there's plenty of cookies in the back, different things too. As Nate said, these values will rise and fall. So you all probably have seen the paper or heard that our office every 3 years does a full kind of revaluation or look at property values. We don't impact and we don't have control over the CAUV value. We only look at the market value of the farmland. So the state with their formula looks at the CAUV value. Every 3 years when we do our market value updates, they also will apply new values to our area. So we don't have those numbers yet. Once we do find them, we'll be able to share those out. The state will give them, I think, usually in late spring, early summer, if I remember correctly, to see what will happen next year. So we'll keep you updated on that. And I mentioned, for example, Wayne and Colebrook townships as being kind of interesting ones to look at. One of the reasons we pay so much attention to CAUV, making sure that folks who can qualify get it, and folks who aren't properly using it are not getting it. The savings, that 75% or so that I mentioned that farmers are receiving, is actually paid for by the other property owners in the taxing district. So if you've ever heard us talk about tax rates and property taxes, revenue always stays flat for local governments. So the revenue comes from somewhere. In the CAUV case, your tax burden is actually decreased, and the other residential properties in your tax district will pay the difference. So tax rates in more rural areas are actually traditionally higher than tax rates in more of our urban areas here in the county, largely because of a great amount of savings that we get with our farmland. So that's just kind of information for why we take our role so seriously in inspecting and making sure that folks are properly receiving it. So any last questions before we end? So great. We appreciate you taking the time tonight. Feel free to stay around. We'll be here. Happy to answer any questions. And appreciate all the folks online listening. And like I said, this video will be on our YouTube channel, website, in case you know of anyone who missed. So have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you.